Hello, 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 friends. I hope that you all are doing well. I hope that you had a marvelous week and weekend. I know that I did. So, I actually went to Texas over the weekend with some friends. We went to a women's Bible conference, and it was so good. It was definitely a break that I needed, and I learned so much more about myself. And it really helped me be closer to God, so for me that's always good. It was a good time to just kind of relax, get to know my friends a little bit more, meet other people, and learn different things. So, we are almost in the mid of October, which is kind of sad for me because October is my favorite. Fall is my favorite season. I love everything pumpkin spice. And I think I told you guys that before. So anyways, yeah, my week has been pretty good. I got back. Before I left, I did a lot of homework, so I wouldn't have to worry about too much. And, I'm just getting back into the swing of things. So today, we are going to talk about manipulation and cults. Now, I will not go into too much detail about different cults because I will save that for a different episode. And I figured, in a sense, this kind of plays into the mob mentality thing. Because cult leaders, they do use manipulation. And for some reason, they're able to control a lot of people. A mob, I guess, if you will. I am your host, Kitty Gonzalez. And you're listening to What the Psychology. Yeah, so I literally got back last night and I'm recording on Tuesday, so I might be up super late to publish this on Wednesday. But I love you guys and I'm going to keep providing content no matter how busy life gets for me because you guys are the best and I definitely appreciate you listening and your support. And I love interacting with you guys when I get to. So, just a few thoughts to, share my appreciation. Now, with it being October, I figured with this episode that maybe I can dive deeper into the other cults because it's kind of a spooky thing, and why not talk about a little bit of spooky things in October? The chief editor is making noise, you guys. Okay, so manipulation. So psychological manipulation can be defined as the exercise of undue influence through mental distortion and emotional exploitation with the intent to seize power, control, benefits, and or privileges at the victim's expense. A much simpler definition is getting people to do what you want to do. However, that can also be applied to compliance, which we went over last week. Manipulation is more not so subtle than compliance. Although compliance is a more subtle version of manipulation, it's not full-blown manipulation because in compliance they're not really controlling, seizing power, or trying to take benefits or privileges away from you. They're just trying to kind of get you to sway their way. It's more of, I guess, persuasion. But I guess in all of these, they use persuasion to get you to do what they want to do. But manipulation is more full-blown control. I guess that's the best way to describe the difference. So manipulation. What are some things that people do to try to manipulate you? Number 1, home court advantage. So this is when a manipulative individual insists on you meeting and interacting in a physical space where they can exercise more dominance and control over you. So this can be their office, their home, their car, or other spaces where they feel like they have ownership, familiarity, and more of an advantage. And this is where you lack that. So they're trying to set the stage where they're more comfortable and you're not. And in that sense, it's much easier to manipulate. Number 2. So they let you speak first to establish your baseline and look for weaknesses. So actually, I know we've talked about salesmen a lot, and I'm sorry if you're one of those, but it's true, and they're taught how to do this. So many salesmen, they do this when they prospect you. They ask you general and probing questions. They establish a baseline about your thinking and behavior. From there, they can evaluate your strengths and your weaknesses. So this type of questioning with a hidden agenda can also occur at the workplace or even in personal relationships. This does happen a lot, though. They'll ask you, like, probing questions maybe about your previous relationships. And if you were in a controlling relationship before, then they may see that as a positive for them, because if you were in a controlling relationship before, they may assume that they can easily take control of you now. So that's just an example. Number 3. So this is like manipulation of facts. For example, lying, excuse making, being two-faced, blaming the victim for causing their own victimization, deformation of the truth, strategic disclosure or withholding of key information, exaggeration, understatement, or one-sided bias of issue. We see this a lot on social media. We see this a lot when it comes to different people in their workforces, whether good or bad. Like, interrogators use these tactics to get a confession. It's just really how they do that and how smart they are about doing it, whether that can come back on them later or not. Now, the next one is on the same baseline but different. Number 4. So in this part, they overwhelm you with facts and statistics. So instead of manipulating facts, they just overwhelm you. So some individuals enjoy intellectual bullying by presuming to be the expert and most knowledgeable in certain areas. They take advantage of you by imposing alleged facts, statistics, and other data you may know little about. Or they assume that they just know more than you and they try to project that. So this can happen in sales and financial situations, in professional discussions and negotiations, as well as in social and relational arguments. I've had this happen a lot, and I'm going to give you examples. I will spill the beans because why not? So they will do this by presuming expert power over you. They will hope to push through their agenda more convincingly. And some people use this technique for no other reason than to feel a sense of intellectual superiority. Now, of course, this certainly does not mean that facts and evidence are not important at all. That's not what this is about. But the point is that there is a significant difference between presenting objective facts for the purpose of problem solving versus utilizing biased or covert information for the purpose of manipulation. Now, I have a couple of people that I can think of that I am no longer friends with that would use this tactic. And of course, most of you know, and if you don't know, I will pretty much say it now. I'm a Christian. I am a Bible believer. I read the Bible. I try to every day and I pray. I'm very religious, but I am also, I guess, some people perceive Christians to be hateful, and honestly, my opinion is that they're not Christians. However, that does depend on their relationship with Jesus Christ. They don't act like they should as a Christian, if that makes sense. I know too, I'll put in quotations, Christians that would use this tactic a lot. One of them more than the other because I was closer to them. Now this person, we were friends for a pretty long time, and all of a sudden they just changed. Now it's kind of funny because I think that they became friends with the other person that I'm referring to, and they kind of discipled them in a way that is negative. And they would do this a lot. There would be times where they would start arguments. They liked to start arguments over spiritual things, especially things in the Bible. And I'm not saying that I like to argue or I like to debate, but I want people to be correct, especially if they're going to quote the Bible. And this friend would use certain verses and say that it meant one thing when it clearly didn't. And they would also not look at the context behind those words. Most of these they would quote were like the letters that Paul wrote. And for those that aren't familiar, the letters from Paul were after Jesus died and resurrected. And he was actually a persecutor of Christians. And then he had an experience where he was confronted by Jesus. So he pretty much, after he resurrected, he was on earth for some time. And a bunch of people saw him. A bunch of people witnessed him, which is really insane if you think about it. But on the road to Damascus, he was going to persecute more Christians, and he just had this experience, and it transformed him. And ironically, he became one of the one of the most influential writers of the New Testament of the Bible. He became a leader of the church, and a lot of the churches kind of split up to different towns to kind of spread the message. And a lot of these issues, just like the church today and in societies today, they had their own issues. And they would send letters to Paul saying, what should we do about this issue? And he would respond. And a lot of their responses are what are in the Bible, what are in the New Testament. For example, so my friend or my ex-friend would use these letters to try to make a point that didn't make any sense or that was not relatable at all, and would try to use it as fact. And I didn't do it in a way to argue. I was just like, look, you're using the wrong scripture to try to get your point across. And people are going to be very objective to that, just like how I am, because you're wrong. But they would not want to accept the fact that they were wrong. Or another example is you could argue a point and say, well, in this translation it says that. And then they would say, well, I don't believe in that translation. And then it's like, well, so you don't believe in any of the translations? And in original writing, the New Testament was written in Greek. The Old Testament was written in Hebrew. So I would ask that person, like, well, this word that you're arguing with me because of translations, what was the original Greek word? And they would have no idea. I'm like, so until you can give me that answer, your argument is mute. And they hated that, and we pretty much stopped being friends because of that. And I got tired of them bullying me and tried to make them seem like they were intellectually superior to me when they weren't. Honestly, I really didn't care if they were right or wrong. I just wanted them to present their arguments in a way that made sense. I digress. And I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry if you're into the Christian religion, because it's something very important to me. But I wanted to explain it so that way you would kind of understand the context of how this person was behaving. So I've definitely had someone try to use manipulation with this tactic to try to convince me that their point was right and that I was wrong when I wasn't. But another example is there were things that I actually agreed with them on, but it was the same thing. They would use scripture that did not back up their claim. So I would say, well, that does not back up the claim, because if you look at the context, that's not what it's saying at all. And they would just get so mad, and then they would call me names. They would call me disrespectful and narcissistic and all these things. And I'm like, I'm none of those things. Like, I know who I am. I know my identity. And the fact that they would spew hate really shows, like, their true colors as a, in quotations, Christian. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that example made sense. I tried to explain it as thoroughly as I could. And maybe you learned something today that you didn't know. It's funny because a lot of people think that Christians are perfect, and we're not. And we have our own issues within our own communities. And a lot of us aren't hateful. We may disagree with something, but that doesn't mean we hate people. Are we going to vote for it? Are we going to go to a march? Are we going to support them? Heck no, because that's against our beliefs. But we're never going to be hateful towards anybody. At least that's the majority of us. Okay, so moving on. Number 5. So this one is overwhelming you with procedures and red tape. So with certain people, they use bureaucracy, paperwork, procedures, laws and bylaws, committees, and other roadblocks to maintain their position and power while making your life more difficult. This technique can also be used to delay fact-finding and truth-seeking, hide flaws and weaknesses, and evade scrutiny. Oh boy, this happens a lot in the military. And I'm so glad I'm out, because it's sad to say, but I could not say that if I was in the military. When you're in the military and you criticize things, it's like a target is on your head. But once you're separated from the military, it's like they can't do anything to you. They use this tactic a lot. Bureaucracy. They use CMJ. They use a lot to threaten. And it really depends on your leadership. I will say I've had good leadership and I've had bad leadership. The bad leadership will use this in this manipulative way. And good leadership will use procedures and laws and corrections to gently help to lead you to the course that you should be on. Whereas bad leadership, they will overwhelm you with these things to try to get you to fail. They will try to make it seem like they're better than you. And I've had experiences with that as well. And it's crazy looking back to know that I was manipulated and I was made to feel like I was not good enough, or my self-worth wasn't good enough because of how some leaders made me feel. And sadly enough, they might still be in the Air Force. Some of them actually are, and some of them have made really high ranks, and it's very disappointing. So, okay. I'm trying not to be completely negative today, but this does happen, and a lot of these in manipulation, they are negative, so you might be getting more of the tea today versus the happy cheery Katie, but I will still be the happy cheery Katie today. Number 6. Raising their voice and displaying negative emotions. So some individuals, they raise their voice during discussions as a form of aggressive manipulation. So they assume that if they're able to project their voice loudly enough, or they display negative emotions, that you'll submit to their coercion and give them what they want. So the aggressive voice is frequently combined with strong body language, such as standing or exciting gestures to increase impact. Now, my ex-friend would use this a lot. A lot of times we would be texting, but if we were on a phone call, or at one point we were actually on a Zoom call with other friends, and they just completely lost their stuff. They just went off. And even though people didn't completely agree with either of us, they have told me the way he acted was not right. And I'm like, oh, I know that. But he's been like this for a while, and I don't know what it is because he used to be different. So I've experienced that as well. And this is why it's important to, 1, you can forgive people, but 2, you cut off people or you love them from a distance. Or for me, it's love them from a distance. Not everyone believes that, but distance yourself from them or cut them off. And this person, I've simply just had to cut them off because I gave them many chances, and it was constant manipulation and negativity. And you gotta do what's best for you and your mental health. This one's pretty much self-explanatory, though. They raise their voice, they'll use their body language, they'll maybe talk with their hands more than usual, things like that. So they may show a lot of anger symptoms to kind of make you afraid as well. Okay, so next one, number 7. So this one is negative surprises. So some people, they use this to put you off balance and gain a psychological advantage. This can range from lowballing in a negotiation situation, which remember, you kind of remembered what the lowballing compliance technique was. So this is kind of the same. To a sudden profession that she or he will not be able to come through and deliver in some way. This can happen with coworkers a lot. That coworkers that are manipulative, they said that they were going to do this big project, and then last minute they're like, oh, I can't do it, and now you're stuck doing it. And you don't want the work to fail, you may not want them to fail, so you pick up their slack. That could be a negative surprise manipulation tactic. So typically, like I said, you'll have a little time to prepare and or to counter their move. So when it comes to recruitment, and HR recruiters are really bad about doing this. And it's understandable. They want to pay someone as low as they can for the position that they need. But you have to pay people what they deserve. Especially people with degrees, and the market is saying that they deserve this much and you're wanting to go way under that. But they do that to get you to come to counter them, and you'll still get paid lower. We talked about this last week. Remember, it's a compliance technique. But if they don't give you enough time to reply, or they say, this is how much we want to pay you, and we have 30 other people lined up that want this job. I met with a friend for lunch, and we were actually talking about this a little bit because I just did the compliance episode. So shout out to my girl Wendy. We were talking about one of her family members. They were applying for a job, and on there it asked for the salary range. Now, one thing I told her is, because I worked in HR and I did the HR internship for a while, was they will not offer you a salary unless they're greatly considering you, usually. So if they're trying to lowball you during that, and then they say they have 10 people waiting, it's well, they may have 10 people waiting, but they greatly want you because they're offering you a salary already. That's later on in the process. That's not like a first step thing. So that is something else to consider if you're job searching, or things to be aware of. So in other things, the manipulator, they may ask for additional concessions from you in order to continue working with you. A lot of businessmen are really good at doing this. They'll say it's more of a give and take. You have to give this in order for me to continue to do business. And that can be good or bad. It depends, like if it's for benefit of the company or not, or if they're just trying to manipulate, or this can be used in other ways. And I haven't personally seen this, but I know this exists because obviously this is on a list of things of manipulation. Number 8. Giving you little or no time to decide. That definitely goes along with the last one we talked about, because it says that you have little time to prepare or to counter. This one is a very common sales and negotiation tactic. So this is when they put pressure on you to make a decision before you're ready. And by applying tension and control onto you, it is hoped that you will crack and give in to the aggressor's demands. Kind of like the compliance stuff we talked about, they would use this a lot. They will go door to door and say, hey, we're offering this sale that's only that you can sign up today and it be less. And they say, but you have to sign up today to get it. So they're trying to put pressure on you to sign up when you haven't even thought through a decision. But they want kind of get you to crack and sign up or whatever they're demanding. Number 9. Negative humor designated to poke at your weaknesses and disempower you. So some manipulators like to make critical remarks, often disguised as humor or sarcasm. And they do this to make you seem inferior and less secure. Examples can include any variety of comments, ranging from your appearance to your older model smartphone, to your background and credentials, to the fact that you walked in 2 minutes late and are out of breath, by making you look bad, getting you to feel bad. And with this, the aggressor hopes to impose psychological superiority over you. This is definitely things that my ex-friend would do. It wouldn't be as heavy as this is. They wouldn't really use it as humor, but it would be more of sarcasm. And so I guess that would kind of count. But looking at what we're going to talk about next, that also goes into the next. Number 10. They consistently judge you, criticize you, to make you feel inadequate. So distinct from the last behavior that we talked about, where negative humor is used as a cover. And also, when it comes to that, they'll also say, oh, I was just joking around. They say that to kind of get you to question yourself too. But in this one, the manipulator, they just outright pick on you. By constantly marginalizing, ridiculing, and dismissing you, they keep you off balance and they maintain their superiority. The aggressor deliberately fosters the impression that there is always something wrong with you, that no matter how hard you try, you are inadequate. No, significantly, the manipulator, they focus on the negative without providing genuine and constructive solutions or offering meaningful ways to help. Yeah, this definitely sounds like my last friend, because whenever we would get in an argument, it constantly went to name calling. I was all of a sudden disrespectful and hateful and narcissist just because I disagreed with them, or I didn't like the way that they were trying to reach their message. Ironic, right? So, especially if you have someone who's meeting, like, I think there's 14 of these, and we're on number 10. If they meet, like, a couple of these, you just need to cut them out, okay? Like, just cut them out. Number 11, the silent treatment. Now, I'm not saying that this is completely bad, because, well, I will say it's bad. A lot of people use the silent treatment in, like, marriages because they're angry, but it is a tactic of manipulation. Hilariously enough, if it's the wife doing the silent treatment, most of the men are happy, like, thank God she's finally not talking. I'm sorry if that's an inappropriate type joke, but it is kind of funny, and there is a little bit of truth in that. Women do talk more than men, so. But this can be much deeper, because sometimes in, like, relationships, they use a silent treatment. It won't be for too long. And usually it's more used to clear their own head. And they are showing that they're mad. But when it's not that close a relationship towards a friendship, and they are intentionally placing doubt and uncertainty in your mind, that's when it becomes very manipulative. So by this, they deliberately don't respond to your reasonable calls, text messages, emails, or other inquiries. The manipulator presumes power by making you wait and intends to place doubt and insecurity in your mind. So the silent treatment is a head game where silence is used as a form of leverage. The other friend that I haven't really told you much about, they've been using this on me for quite a long time. But my other friends have said that they have been very cut off from everybody. However, I see it like this. If I send a message and I don't get any response, if you invite other people over to your place and not me, you invite other people to important events in your life and not me, I believe that is the silent treatment. And I believe you've either completely cut me off because you're insecure about yourself, or you're trying to get the silent treatment so one day you creep back into my life and use it as leverage. I have another friend who I used to be super close with, and she became friends with the same others I'm talking about, and I've only seen them once, and anytime I try to text them, there's no response, nothing. And we used to be super close until they met the other. Now I'm going to talk about the third person a little bit more. Number 12. This one is pretend ignorance. This is classic playing dumb. They pretend that they don't understand what you want them to do, and the manipulator pretty much passively, aggressively make you take on what is their responsibility and gets you to break a sweat. So some children use this tactic in order to delay, stall, and manipulate adults into doing for them what they don't want to do. Some grown-ups use this tactic as well when they have something to hide or an obligation they wish to avoid. In other senses, like my friend, ex-friend, number 3, the last time I saw them was like at a group gathering. And they pretty much just played dumb, like, oh, we've just been busy, and they acted like we were still the best of friends, and, like, there was nothing wrong. But obviously something's wrong when they're constantly ignoring you, never talk to you, never reach out to you, never respond to you. But now all of a sudden you're seeing them and they're just acting like they're just ignorant to the situation. Number 13. Guilt baiting. So, examples for this is unreasonable blaming, targeting recipients' soft spots, holding another responsible for the manipulator's happiness and success, or unhappiness and failures. So they target the emotional weakness and vulnerability, and then they coerce into exceeding unreasonable requests and demands. So this one, I don't think I've ever experienced, but they will try to say that someone else is the cause of their happiness or success. They will just blame everybody else and not accept their own. And they will play on that, and then they will try to coerce the recipient to get their requests. So if someone's like, I don't want to pick on anyone in any type of circumstance, but let's say that someone is homeless, and let's say it is their fault, okay? Let's say that they were really bad with their money, they had credit card debt, they did all these things, and then they lose their house. And then they start blaming, like, their ex-wife for it, when, sure enough, them and their ex-wife divorced years ago and weren't even the cause. So trying to play on that emotional vulnerability to say, oh no, like, his wife took the house, and now they need money, or something like that. Number 14. This is the last one, y'all, and this one's victimhood. We know a lot of people use this one. So, examples. Exaggerating or imagined personal issues. Exaggerated or imagined health issues. Dependency, codependency, deliberate frailty to elicit sympathy and favor. They play weak, powerless, or a martyr. Now, the purpose of the manipulative victimhood technique is often to exploit the recipient's goodwill, guilty conscience, sense of duty and obligation, or protective and nurturing instinct. They do this in order to extract unreasonable benefits and concessions. I have a friend who we went to school together, and they constantly post on Facebook that they need money. And with this, it's like, they've been going through our time. They did have substance use issues and things like that. And so, for some reason, they moved to California which is one of the most expensive states, and I don't know why they moved there, but they constantly ask for money so that they can get a hotel. And then they also claim to have multiple jobs. And I checked out they have a GoFundMe so people can give them money. And I noticed that someone anonymously gave them $2,000. And for like a month or so, they didn't say anything on Facebook. It was just completely silence. They didn't share the fact that someone gave them $2,000. They didn't say thank you to everyone helping them. And then a couple months later, sure enough, they surfaced asking for money again. And they've been trying to say that they're going to use the money to leave California and go back to where they're closer to family and things like that, or to a place where it's easier to live, and they don't. So who knows what they're doing with that. But they keep playing on people's emotional weaknesses and their vulnerability. So they try to play the victim here. Now, I'm not saying that their situation is their fault at all. But the fact that people keep giving them money and they don't do what they say is a big part of this manipulation. They keep saying that they're homeless, but it's just funny that they got donated a lot of money and then they surfaced out of nowhere 4 months later and all of a sudden asking for more money. So I just don't get it. I don't understand why people do that. Okay, so now we're going to talk about cults. And we're going to talk about different, wouldn't say statistics, but different facts about cults before we really give it a deep dive into the manipulative part of this. So, number 1, cults, they satisfy the human desire for absolute answers. I'm not going to say religion in general. Some religions have absolute answers and others don't. And in the nature of our environments, there is no absolute answers. And I do know people that they're like completely black and white, but there's a lot of gray areas in life. There's a lot of gray area in what we see when it comes to death in life and where we go after we die. Unless you believe in a certain religion, there is no absolute answer. And people want that. They may say that they don't really care, or they don't believe in a God, or they believe in a God, but they don't name the certain one. There is natural human desire for absolute answers. Whether that answer is they don't believe in anything and that we all go into a black hole or just come non-existent, that is an absolute answer, and that is a belief that some people have. Well, cults, they provide that. They provide an absolute answer to usually the question of where do we go after we die? And usually it's a false belief, but they provide that answer. So, another fact, those with low self-esteem are more likely to be persuaded by a cult. Also, women are more likely than men to join a cult. So, men, you guys get a point. Ironically, many cult members have rejected religion. This to me makes no sense because usually religion has those absolute answers. So I guess this could mean that they rejected religion in the past, but they're searching for those absolute answers. And maybe those absolute answers kind of go on with their own personal beliefs anyways. And so then they're like, oh, I kind of believe in that, or I could see myself believing in what they're saying. And so then they become part of a cult. Or they may have rejected religion because of how other people have acted. I know for me, before I became a Christian, I was not Christian at all. I was actually Wiccan, which is a part of the pagan religion. Or it's like a umbrella under paganism. And I actually despised Christians because growing up in the Bible Belt, you will run into people that are actually Christians. And people say that they're Christian, but they don't act like it. And we ran into a lot of people that said they're Christians and didn't act like it at all. They were hateful, and because of those experiences, I did not want to be any part of them. In fact, me and my friends actually mocked a lot of Christians in high school. But ironically, right before I became a Christian, I met some awesome Christians who are now my friends. They completely turned it on its side. So for me, it was like, oh, these people are cool, but I thought all Christians were just mean and hateful. So I had a wrong sense of what Christians are and what they were really supposed to be. But that can be a big reason why people do reject religion. And that's a legit conversation that we should have. That could be a reason, because I know that's my reason why I initially totally wrote off Christianity. Cult leaders, they are masters at mind control and manipulation. That one's pretty obvious, but it is a fact. Often, cult members, they have no idea that they're in a cult. In fact, they will deny that they are in a cult. If you ever run into anyone who is in a cult-like environment, they will say, I'm not in a cult. It's like, no, you are, because this defines a cult and you believe everything they believe and you're under their manipulation. Cult life can have a dangerous and lasting effect. Most of these are emotional and psychological damage, self-esteem issues, and plenty more. This is because of the way they're treated in the cults. We're going to talk about how people are treated and how they get into cults. Some of these I'm going to talk about are my propositions and also research-based propositions. So, 1, I think that cults, they have a charismatic character type of leader. And there are other people that agree with me, but I think this is pretty standard. They have someone that is very well liked. Someone they will convince people. They are really happy, really jolly usually, and friendly, and you think, oh, okay. And usually they are people that can answer questions that are addressed, and they make people feel like they are belonging to something bigger than themselves. Number 2, this one is well researched, is the we versus they philosophy. So this is saying that the cult in itself, they're saying that they have the truth and you don't. So they will convince their followers that they are superior to those not in the cult. They ultimately lead cult members to isolating themselves socially from friends and family. They replace those relationships with new ones inside the cult. And isolation is actually one of the other tactics, but sometimes people that become members of the cult do this naturally. What happens is once the members of a cult or the cult leader identifies a target, they will deploy a variety of tactics to establish power over the individual. And a lot of those are mental manipulation tactics. And I'm actually going to talk about some of them right now, okay? So some of those tactics can be love bombing. Now this name is kind of an odd phrase, but is mainly used to describe the ways in which someone with low self-esteem is constantly flattered, complimented, and maybe even seduced in order to train their brain to associate the cult with love and acceptance. So they do this by practice of lavishing someone with attention and affection. They'll give compliments, and they will build them up to pretty much break them down. Or they'll build them up to make them think that, oh, I'm indestructible, I'm so great. But they do this because then they can manipulate them. Because as a person with self-esteem issues myself, it is a very overwhelming and very flattering when you do hear compliments and you do hear different things that are great about yourself, and when you get attention and affection. It's very powerful and it's very influential. And so I can see how people are easily manipulated. This is kind of a different tactic, but this is also used in domestic violence type of situations or abusive relationships. Initially, your partner will be very loving. They will romance you. They will woo you. They will make you fall in love with them. And then that way, once you have those feelings established, once they start abusing you, it's a lot harder to leave because you do develop feelings for them. I can't speak from experience because I've been thankful enough to never be in that type of relationship. But I know people that have, and they've even said that you could have told them to get out. You could have tried to do everything to help them, and they can't. They won't because they have developed those feelings, or maybe they have a child with that person, or it could be other financial reasons, but initially it starts out this way, where they're super loving, they're super romantic, and they put you on a pedestal, and they do that so that you fall in love with them, and then they manipulate you later, which is very similar to what cults do to their members. Alright, another one is public humiliation. After new members are love bombed, and then they agree to be part of this group, they are often involved in public humiliation. Cult leaders, they do this to maintain emotional control through various exercises meant to humiliate them. So one method that was used involved someone sitting in a chair. They would be surrounded by other members, And then they were pretty much required to admit their recent failures, base thoughts, and shortcomings. So like I said, they build you up to break you down. The next one is self-incrimination, which is kind of similar, but it doesn't have to be like something criminal. But I know Jim Jones, he was one of the cult leaders, used this tactic a lot. And we'll talk about him in a different episode. But this requires cult members to pretty much provide their leader with written statements detailing their individual fears and mistakes. So instead of doing it publicly, they have to provide this information to the leader. But then the cult leader uses these statements to shame them publicly at a later time. Or when they do something wrong, then they'll pull this out. Kind of like blackmailing. Brainwashing, that's an obvious technique that they use. Cult leaders are definitely known to do this. They will repeat various lies and distortions until members find it difficult to distinguish between reality and cult life. A lot of cults, you will see they will use propaganda. Usually they'll already be isolated and then they'll cut themselves off, or they'll take their electronic devices so they're completely cut off from the world. Other nations do this as well, like North Korea and Cuba. They do this to brainwash their people. And then they'll play propagandic messages that are completely untrue. In a cult setting, they'll play different things like the cult leader is now God, or if you leave, you're going to hell. They will play these messages over and over again to where it's hard to distinguish what's real, what's not, and that's how they become indoctrinated. Another technique is called paranoia. Cults and cult leaders, they use this to maintain a false sense of comfort, and this is why they heavily rely on paranoia attacks. So they'll convince their victims that a group, their families, or the government is out to get them, but that the cult can provide safety. Once the cult member comes to the conclusion that they are right and that their families and country can't keep them safe, they begin to worship and put all of their faith in their cult leader. To take this a little bit further, cult leaders and cult members, they become so into this paranoia that then it'll become a thing where everyone in the group is constantly watching you, which is kind of true, but you become so paranoid and then you want to leave but you can't because other cult members are so deep and they're so into the beliefs of the cult that if you leave, they believe that, one, that will look bad on them for losing a member, or they'll even be told that if a member leaves and you don't report it, then you could be punished. So they use paranoia and these other tactics to really get to you. And all of these tactics, they are used to overwhelm your cognition, to change your brain to think the way that they want you to think. Now, we talked about the illusion of comfort a little bit. This kind of goes with some of the other tactics used for the things that cults do. So, emotional comfort is the center to the allure of cults. Cult members, they tend to meet this need by making promises that are virtually unattainable. But they, of course, don't reveal that. And they'll even say that these typically are not found anywhere else in society. So this, according to a guy last name Peterson, could conclude that complete financial security, constant peace of mind, perfect health, and eternal life, all of those things could be inclusive into this message. So then cult leaders will employ mind and behavioral control techniques that are focused on severing followers' connections to the outside world. So once you're in a cult, they use tactics like fear, eternal hell, punishment, things like that to keep you in the cult. They could use shame and other heavy emotions. Something that I added to my notes is that a lot of people that were born into cults and then they eventually leave, they are usually disowned by the members of the cults, including family members. And then some that are in the cult are pretty much deemed to be punished if they contact other members that have left the cult. Because they're trying to keep this under wraps to where they have no connection to the outside world. Now, that sounds a lot like North Korea. They have so many strict rules that they follow. Even they are manipulated so much to where they are taught that they can't even think in their own minds anything negative about their leader. Now, Rachel Bernstein, she is actually a California-based therapist. Whoop whoop. Because I one day will be a therapist. She actually works with former cult members. And she says that there are 3 different types of cult leaders, and we're going to dive into those a little bit. Number 1 is the Delusional Martyr. So now Bernstein said she probably considers this one the most dangerous. No, that sounds kind of weird, but if you think about it, they use their unyielding beliefs to convince others to buy into the delusion because they actually believe in this. Now remember, in a previous episode when we talked about schizophrenia, we talked about the difference between hallucinations and delusions. Delusions were pretty much over-exaggerated thoughts or feelings. There's another way to describe it as well, but it could be like the Queen of England is out to get me. But in a cult setting, usually their belief could be that they are God or like they are the new prophet or something. And there's another example that Bernstein actually gave. And she gave the example of Heaven's Gate in San Diego. This is a cult where 39 members committed mass suicide, as instructed by their leader Marshall Applewhite in 1997. I don't think I've ever heard of this, so this is very interesting. Now, Applewhite, who previously reported having a near-death experience, he was convinced that a UFO would soon come to the Earth and help humans leave their bodies for a higher existence. Now, the thing is, he truly believed that this mothership was coming and that they all needed to leave their corporal existence and go into the mothership. And they all joined in on the psychosis. This was an interview that Bernstein had with The Insider. So it's not just someone trying to manipulate you. This is someone who truly does believe in these things. People that may think, oh, the apocalypse is coming, and things like that. We see that a lot in the news. Right now there's the Doomsday Cult murders or whatever that's going on. And where there's under investigation and they think that they might have killed their children or something. We don't have all the facts on that yet, but we see this in society today as well. The second one is the preacher turned egomaniac, which when I read this, I personally thought Jim Jones. And it's funny because he was actually listed on here as one of those types. This is when other cult leaders, they don't really realize their charismatic potential at first. But once they do, they become egomaniacs. So they may start as a teacher, a street preacher, even a regular preacher, or in any other public speaking position. And they may gain a following, and eventually they realize that people cling on to what they have to say, and people run with that skill. Jim Jones was definitely one of those because I believe he was a type of preacher. And once he realized that he had all this charisma and people really liked him, he became an egomaniac and quickly gained control of all because they did believe him. And I don't really know for sure what he was preaching at first, but I think at first his intentions were really well. But then once he gained all the control, he didn't give a crap about any of it. He just wanted to be in control. And lastly, there's the hard and fast narcissist. Who can you think of for this one? For me, I think of Charles Manson. I don't think they listed him on this, but yeah, I think of Manson. But he was also charismatic too, but anyways. So, these are quotes from Bernstein again. She said that that's how they've been since they were little. They feel ultimately entitled to completely lie to you, to put on this good, charming face. Yep. To get you to believe what they're selling, whatever it is, whether it's God or a product or anything. And she continued to say that actually most cult leaders are narcissists and a bottomless pit of ego need. And I completely agree, girl. Completely agree. I need to make friends with this person. Anyway, this type of personality could explain why someone like Rainier set up his cult in the manner that he did. Now Rainier, I can't remember what his cult was called, but it was like a bunch of letters. So he set up his cult in where he had a constant need for members' blackmail, what he called collateral, and obedience to him and his belief system. So pretty much if a cult member devoted a decade of their life to the group, one slip up would label them as untrustworthy or failure to their community. So that belief creates a hamster wheel of unhealthy behaviors and relationships. All of this according to my girl Bernstein. And she also said, I would say most cult members are malignant narcissists. They don't care about the damage they're causing, they don't care about the lies they're telling, and they don't care about the families they're destroying. They just need it. They need to be loved, they need to be adored, and they need to be feared. Oh, I agree with all of this. So that's pretty much diving into manipulation and cults. Because this is such a big topic, that's why I want to individually go over different cults. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask everybody, what cults do you want me to go over? And maybe why? What are your favorites? I do think I have a few in mind already, but this one like Rainier, I never even heard of. So that might be one that I look up into. So what are your thoughts? What do you think are the worst and best, I guess depending on how you look at it, tactics of manipulation? Have you ever used it on anyone, or have you been manipulated in the past? Were you able to spot the signs, or were you stayed in that toxicity? I know for me, I finally got strong enough to where I'm like, I know I'm better than that. I know my worth. I know my identity. Even though I do struggle with self-image, I'm not going to let someone put me down when I know my worth over them. And sometimes you have to be that way. Sometimes you have to be a little bit of egotistical. And I'm not saying that that's completely a bad thing, but in these situations you have to be to try to get yourself out of the lies and the tactics that others will try to use on you. And to me, I think you have to reveal it. Like, I don't think it's a good thing that people do that. People try to manipulate you. It's not good. So, tell me what you think. Did you know that we have a Facebook group? Yep, we have a Facebook page and a Facebook group called What the Psychology. You can find on Facebook at WT Psychology. We're on Twitter at WT Psychology. Instagram at What the Psychology. What else? I think that's really it. We're on all major platforms. Let me know what you think. Interact with me. Interact with others. And have a wonderful day. I'm Katie Gonzalez, and you've been listening to What the Psychology. Stay psyched, y'all.